Good day everyone, and welcome to my channel. I'm Trix, and I tend to talk about various things. I also talk about TTRPGs, and this video is going to be about the Wizards of the Coast / Hasbro situation, their reaction, and a few other bits and pieces that we found out. Let's start from the beginning. This is due to a supposed change in the OGL. A few weeks ago, about 2 approximately, there were some leaks of a new OGL and SRD. If you're unfamiliar with those two terms, SRD means System Resource Document and OGL means Open Game License. These two things enable people such as Pathfinder, such as Grim Hollow, such as Wild Wastelands, and many others, including the Warcraft ttrpg that existed for a while, to make games using that system. So now we understand what those two documents are. One basically enables people to create games using certain terms such as vampires, monsters, the agility, dexterity, that kind of formula that TTRPGs use for stats and monsters. So you can use those, but you can't use trademarked termed monsters. For example, Beholders are one, Mind Flayers are another. There are a couple of others really, but for the very basics, that's all you need to know what those two things are. They've existed since the year 2000, and they attempted to change these before when 4th edition hit. It was very unpopular. Pathfinder was basically a reaction to that change, and in a lot of ways, Pathfinder has the spirit of 3.5, but it does it a lot better in some ways and not as good in other ways. I have issues with some of Pathfinder, but not the setting, not the game itself, more the setting, and it's like one setting only. That's my biggest gripe with Pathfinder. But moving on from all this, we now go into what happened next. Well, those leaks turned out to be true. After that, about a week later or so, we got a document that was a PDF that appeared online, and some people were analysing it. Basically, this document basically went, you have to register for everything, whether you make free content or not. We can tell you where you can publish, we can tell you how you can publish. If you make a certain amount of money, you have to give us some money. The target was $750,000 net, not gross income, and whether you earned $1 or the maximum amount, you still had to register with their DMs Guild. But that's not the worst of it. The worst of it's coming later. Although that's bad, and that would impact a lot of places, such as Knights of the Old Republic, because that uses the SRD and the OGL, the first two games. I'm not sure on the online one. I don't think it does, because it does things very weirdly, the online one. And then also, as I've previously mentioned, the Warcraft TTRPG that existed. That was a great game. That had a lot of heart in it, and the people who wrote that I think that was one of the best TTRPGs that have ever existed, simply because of the amount of data that it contained. But we'll move on from that and my fanboying of that game. It turned out to be true. Wizards of the Coast said nothing. There was no communication, and there was supposed to be a live stream on the last Thursday last week, but it didn't happen. It got cancelled. They released a very short statement on Twitter saying that we've heard your concerns and we'll address them. Then again, nothing happened. All of a sudden, online, they put a post on their webpage and basically went, we're sorry, in the way that BP Oil said they're sorry for destroying ecosystems. It also said, we won, but you also won. It tried to claim victory over people who were abusing the system, and while there are occasional people who will make ERP-based TTRPGs, I think they were getting at those type of people, but those are so very far and few between that unless you really look for them, you're not going to find them. Fatal exception. I think there was another couple of things that they didn't want people to use it for racist characters when they themselves had the Hadzi, a racist caricature in the updated Spelljammer book. It's directly influenced by a racist character, and anyone who says it wasn't is very short-sighted at best and ignorant at worst. Moving on from that, the communication between Wizards of the Coast and the fanbase is very poor. They are in a very precarious position, but they've also tried to distract people from that position with the movie Sea of Thieves that's upcoming. While that movie does look good, I would encourage everyone to seriously think whether watching that at the cinema. At the moment, fans who create homebrew, fans who create content for their friends, fans who create maps on ttrpg or little settings that they put up for a donation amount. Those would be hit by the changes that they said are not going to happen anymore. Their apology is rather short-sighted, and it contains in the updated 2.0 that the grace period that they're talking about in that apology or statement will only last 6 extra months, regardless of who leaked the document. And the forthcoming leaks, we have to owe them thanks, because games creation is one of the greatest and funnest things about this hobby and the community. I think that when you create a game, when you homebrew a game, you bring something special into it, and if they're going to come down on that and stop people from doing that simply because of a few bad actors and their jealousy over Pathfinder having a superiority system, that's their own problem. They've created most of their own enemies, and while I can't encourage anyone to really trust Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast, their statements are very hollow. I will note one that they've said recently. They've said that D&D has no wish to go into NFTs, but if you look at Transformers, who Hasbro also own, that went down the NFT route. Hasbro is lying to most people, and I think that they are trying to over-monetize the content, which we'll come to in a moment. After all that's said and done, last night, rather, my time, or very early morning, there was another leak. We found out that Wizards of the Coast have plans to make you pay to use their services. Now that's not anything new, is it? If you want to buy a book, if you want to buy a PDF, you have to pay for it. Of course, there are certain areas in the Caribbean that you can get said documents for free, and while I'm not encouraging anyone to do that, they were going to make people pay a subscription for accessing content that they create on OneD&D. They want to over-monetize the content. Not only do they want you to allow them free access to any homebrew and anything you publish, they also want to be able to tell you where to publish, and then they, on top of that, want you to give them extra money as a subscription-based service. A few other people and the reactions that have happened from this thing are expected. I will talk a little bit about those now, but I think, personally, this isn't something new. This is just them trying to pull same tricks, just in a different direction. The oversaturation of Magic the Gathering has basically crippled that game, which is a shame because it can be fun. The constant reprinting of decks and bringing back cards that are once blacklisted just so you can reprint them, it feels, I don't know, dirty in a lot of ways. Also, they had some collaboration with Warhammer 40,000, and while I don't really want to comment on that, really. The fact that they are worse bad actors than Games Workshop at the moment is something to be said. Right, so now I'm going to talk about people's reactions. Well, there were a few people who've said, we are no longer going to have anything to do with WOTC or D&D as a brand. These people include AJ Pickett. There's various other groups and peoples. Chaosium has decided to release their own system, as well as Kobold Press, Matt Colville, AJ Pickett, and a few other people. I will note that Pizzaio is going to create an ORC, or Original Resource Communication, and I think that's what it's called anyway. And they're going to give that to a body like Linux, and that document will be curated and looked after by an impartial company or group of people who are determined to keep gaming free and accessible. That's a wonderful thing. The fact that Wizards of the Coast wanted to dictate what fantasy ttrpgs are and were is terrible, in my opinion, and that is only my opinion. You might have a different one. Lastly, I just want to say that if the things have made you very angry, that's a good feeling to have, because no one should tell you what you can do when you want to play a game. No one. If you want an ERP game, find a group that wants to do that with you and do it. If you want to play a game where you're Skaven running around in Undercity or in Nullin trying to assassinate people, that's a perfectly reasonable game to have. Although Warhammer Fantasy doesn't really use the D20 system, I'm just using these as examples. Or you want to find up those old Warcraft books that I mentioned, or the masses and masses of 3.5 content that exist. Or maybe you've decided, I don't want anything to do with Wizards of the Coast, and now going to look at Pathfinder and the ORC. While this might split community in a lot of ways, I can only say that this reminds me of when it was split before, when Pizeo went, we're going to do our own thing, and then before that, when TSR was acquired by Wizards of the Coast in the first place. I'm not sure of the legality of AD&D and OSR type material. I know that Morkborg is also doing a free system, but I don't know if it's going to be based on the OSR, and the legality of OSR content is always a grey area because it's never really been challenged. It would take a big company to challenge it. I just want to add a couple of final thoughts to the end of this video, and it's quite long, and I'm really sorry if you've stuck with it, but hopefully it's broke everything down with you enough to be understandable. There are bad actors. There are people in communities who will use certain excuses to be horrible people. That's not an understatement. Whatever community you're in, there's always going to be people who are going to be mean or spiteful in it. But there's also a lot of camaraderie. There's also a lot of people coming together and expressing new ideas in those communities. No company, no matter how big they are, no matter if they have AD&D, or no matter if they have Forgotten Realms, has the right to tell you how to use your books, how to use your content. If you write something and it's fan art or fan works, that should be covered by some sort of community guidelines. The fact that they wanted to remove those community guidelines and make you register with them as some sort of like what and what isn't allowed. The document, the OGL and the SRD were created before the Creative Commons license. What does that mean? Creative Commons license gives people an ability to create content based on the ideas of something, as long as you credit those people or the ideas before. Important note, the SCP Foundation does this, as well as the Backrooms. Those are both CCL, or those are both Creative Content License worlds. Moving on from that, I want to talk about one of the creators of the OGL and SRD. He's come out and said that people would ignore if they tried to update it, and that's probably true. People would create their own homebrew. People would move away from OneD&D. A lot of other people are wanting big people or big named creators to take a stand, and while a lot of people have, such as Mr. X, such as Matt Colville, such as AJ Pickett, and many others, such as Kobold Press, Chaosium, Pizeo, and many others, the reaction from Critical Role has been met with some annoyance. You have to remember that Critical Role is sponsored by basically Wizards of the Coast. They can't probably come out and say anything bad. I will note that Matt Mercer used a hashtag in one of the latest videos that they did, which is basically supporting the community. And while he might not be able to come out and say, we don't like what they're doing, he is with us, I think, in spirit. And that's a good thing. Don't be too mad at people who are locked into contracts, because those contracts are usually very strict. And that's it. That's all that really can be said about everything. Unless they really do something stupid, this is probably the Get You By video. I'd like to thank everyone who watched this video. Thank you very much for your time. And that's it. I'm Trix, everyone, and bye-bye.